Alberta Primetime with Michael Higgins.
Welcome to Alberta Primetime. Ahead tonight, our politics panel on fallout from legislation to remove politics and ideology from classrooms. But first, provincial power over immigration.
We're taking all legal means possible, which is in my mandate letter from the Premier, to take more control over provincial immigration. And in doing so, it will support the businesses in Alberta, and it will create a more transparent process for people coming from out of country to work.
Reference there to the new Immigration Oversight Act legislation requiring employers to register with the province before accessing federal temporary foreign worker programs, while also creating a licensing system for immigration consultants and recruiters. And with the issue of immigration set to play a major role in the Smith government's planned October referendum, opposition is building to the nature of the questions. And joining us now is Avnish Nanda, spokesperson for our Alberta Advantage. Mr. Nanda, welcome to Alberta Primetime.
Thank you for having me.
All right, your group is behind an online petition pushing back against the referendum, demanding the government scrap it. What's motivating that response?
Well, this referendum is about demonizing immigrants. It's about making Alberta no longer a place that is welcoming to newcomers. This is not about policy, it's about politics. None of the referendum questions are things within the provincial government to control, and they are premised on false understandings of how immigration works and what temporary foreign workers do. For instance, people here on work visas or on student visas pay taxes. They pay taxes for the same services that this government now wants to charge them for. Refugee claimants, the Alberta government doesn't pay their healthcare expenses. That's the federal government. So the referendum questions are misleading. They're based on false pretenses, and you have to question why they're being advanced. Why are we spending millions of dollars, maybe tens of millions of dollars, for a referendum that won't change anything, that is based on misleading facts? And the only logical conclusion is that this government wants to make Albertans forget about the other issues in this province that are within its control by blaming and scapegoating immigrants.
I plan on coming back to the issue of the questions in a quick moment. Maybe first, though, why an online petition? And maybe not a citizen-led initiative in much the way others are doing.
Well, this has already started. It's going to be on the ballot in October, so a citizen-led initiative doesn't really make sense. And why this started was essentially we saw the landscape here, and we didn't see anyone really standing up. We're not politicians. We're not people who are seeking elected office. We're folks who are concerned with the narrative that's going on in this province. We need immigrants. We've had immigrants come to this province since it was created and really build this place into the economic powerhouse that it is. Our agricultural sector, our oil sands, our urban centers have become major players economically in this country, internationally, because of the contribution of immigrants. We need immigrants to continue to be a prosperous and thriving place. And this initiative, this rhetoric from the very top of our elected officials undermines that. Why would anyone come here as an engineer, a doctor, for other necessary kind of labor when we have a government saying we're going to charge you more and we're going to demonize you? It doesn't make sense. It's counterintuitive. It's counterproductive.
One of the questions asks about support for introducing a law mandating only Canadian citizens, permanent residents, and individuals with Alberta-approved immigration status be eligible for provincially funded programs. What do you take away from that reference to an Alberta-approved immigration status?
It is vague. It is misleading. And let's just take a step back and look at what we're dealing with here. For people who don't fall under those first two categories, let's say they're temporary residents, people on work permits, so on temporary work permits, or students, they pay taxes already. They are paying taxes for the same services the Alberta government now wants to deny them. For other temporary residents, let's say refugee claimants, the federal government pays for their healthcare services. it's not clear who that targets. Again, this is about politics over policy, and I'm afraid that the ramifications over this short-term political play is going to have broader consequences, where Alberta is no longer going to be a competitive place to draw the best immigrants from around the world.
Bill 26, that legislation we referenced off the top earlier, to what degree does that play into your concerns over the government's direction here with control over immigration?
It's extremely frustrating. I'm a person who represents exploited immigrants who've been taken advantage by unscrupulous immigration consultants or employers. Instead of a referendum, why don't we, do the stuff that is found in Bill 26 earlier? That addresses the situation in terms of people exploiting migrants, taking advantage of the system, rather than this referendum. If we really wanted to improve the system and ensuring that we have the best immigrants here to fill the jobs that we need them to fill, and without people exploiting the system, let's do that. Why are we having this referendum that's going to cost tens of millions of dollars to effectively achieve nothing, because it's not within Alberta's control to do any of this? And second of all, the questions don't make any sense, because again, the people that Danielle Smith wants to target actually pay taxes for services, and Alberta is not on the hook for their healthcare costs.
Maybe as a final question, if I could, to what degree do you see your efforts competing with a petition push for a referendum on separation? How does that push for separation play into this larger conversation?
I think it's actually part and parcel of the political play that's happening here. And I just think it's sad. I think what this government is doing to these referendum questions is really tearing the social fabric of this province. We are Albertans, but we're strong Canadians as well. Demonizing immigrants goes to the very core of what makes us Canadian and Albertan. And I just don't know why these decisions are being made. We have other issues in this province. None of them, real issues, I would say, none of them are reflected in the referendum questions.
All right. We'll have to leave it there. Appreciate your time this evening, Mr. Nanda. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Avnish Nanda is spokesperson for the group, Our Alberta Advantage. From legislation to remove politics and ideology from classrooms, to pushback on Alberta immigration powers, and Pierre Poilievre's call for scrapping the gas tax. Time now for tonight's politics panel. And joining us this evening, Laurie Williams, political scientist at Mount Royal University, and Chris Spearman, former mayor of Lethbridge. Good evening to you both. And let's begin with the introduction this week of amendments to the Education Act aimed at ensuring politics, ideology, and bias are removed from classrooms.
What I'm confident this will achieve is we'll make sure that schools are places where diverse views are being discussed, debated, and again, it's not to limit conversation or debate, but to actually encourage it and to allow students to have these types of conversations so that we can foster critical thinking.
I believe kids are smart. I believe they need to learn how to deal with opposing views the way this government has never learned, and we should trust teachers to do their jobs.
Bill 25 requires all viewpoints from students to be treated equally at school, even if teachers believe those views are misinformed or potentially harmful. There are also new guidelines on displaying flags, playing the national anthem once a week, and school naming regulations. Laurie, what do you see the government seeking to achieve politically through the introduction of this bill?
It's a bit of a puzzle, because they're acknowledging that there are already professional standards and curriculum standards that require the consideration of diverse viewpoints. So I don't know how this legislation is going to improve things. I don't quite know. The two recordings of things that were said we have clips of are reflective of what's going on in most classrooms most of the time. And I think I'm a bit concerned that it seems to line up with a almost an animosity toward teachers. There ought to be a mutually trusting relationship between teachers and parents. They ought to be able to work together rather than seeing one another as adversaries or opponents in education of students.
Chris, how does this play in the wake of a contentious labor dispute over issues like overcrowding, complex classrooms? It ended in teachers being legislated back to work last fall.
I think it's a distraction from what the real issues are. The government's committed to make positive changes in education, and they should do that, and they should focus on that. I think this legislation is unwarranted. There's no penalties under this legislation, but what it might do is invite complaints from parents that we haven't had before, which simply is going to bog down the system. I served as a school board trustee for 18 years, and there were sometimes unhappy parents, and I would hate to see this become a process where people in the minority begin to take up valuable time of professionals, of administrators, advancing their particular views. So I think that would be a concern to me, is that it's going to invite frivolous complaints about what's happening in the classroom.
Laurie, as an educator, a political scientist, how do you see this potentially impacting classroom discussion dynamics?
It might actually limit the willingness of teachers to discuss some things for fear of it being interpreted in the wrong way. But on a broader political level, I think people have elected their school boards to oversee and adapt what's going on within their region, to adapt that to the concerns and the needs of the folks that elected them. And what we're seeing increasingly is the provincial government wants to take control over what's happening at the level of school boards and at the level of city councils, and concentrate more of that power in the hands of the federal government. So it actually goes against democratic representation rather than reflecting it. And to Chris's point, I think it gives a louder voice to concerns that I'm not sure are completely justified within Alberta. It reflects concerns that we hear out of the United States, campaigns to try to take over school boards in a place where school boards do very different things than they do here in Alberta. They have powers there that are not the same as the powers of school boards here in Alberta. So again, it's a response to an issue or a problem that I don't think is central in Alberta, and it's more prohibitive. It's more punitive, if you like, than supportive. What we need is supports in the classroom so that teachers can deal with real problems like violence, which is ostensibly part of the reason for this bill, but almost no discussion of how they're going to promote safety is included at this point. And the focus is much more on imposing or restricting rather than supporting and enabling.
Okay, up next, we heard from the group Our Alberta Advantage off the top on the drive behind a new online petition pushing back against the Smith government moves to take more control over immigration in the province and demanding referendum questions on such be scrapped. Chris, what kind of spotlight do you see this putting on the government's referendum efforts, and how do you see this pushback going over?
I wish them well. I think there has been an effort to blame immigrants for some of the issues that are happening in healthcare and education in terms of overcrowding, when the real issue is the lack of funding and support. I don't think we need to treat people as scapegoats. I think our guest really, he deals with real people, people who are struggling with the immigration system, and I think adding more complications to it is not going to help.
Laurie, Bill 26, the Immigration Oversight Act, tabled in the legislature on Wednesday as well. 5 of the 9 questions on the October 19th referendum ballot involve issues around immigration. What's to be made of the degree of control the Smith government is looking to harness here? Well,
I mean, I think the idea of trying to restrict unscrupulous practices by immigration consultants. We hear stories of people who come to Canada because they've been recruited or facilitated to get a job here, and they are forced to pay a significant portion of their salary directly to the recruiting agency. So there are a lot of unethical, unscrupulous, even illegal activities that are being undertaken, and it's not helping the folks that are coming here to work, and it's not good for Alberta. That part of the bill, at least in terms of what it's trying to do, makes sense. I'm not quite sure how the licensing of these consultants, if they're working as unlicensed consultants, I don't know if this will make it any easier to expose them. But the fact that the effort is being made there, I think, is important. What's problematic about the bill and the referendum questions is that it suggests that immigrants are somehow increasing the costs to Albertans, that are making schools more crowded and they're not paying their fair share, that they ought to pay more on top of what they already are. So this group is highlighting that the folks that are coming here are contributing to the prosperity of Alberta. They're contributing to their economy. They're doing work that in some cases Albertans are unwilling to do. They come here with expertise in some cases, and we want to attract professionals like engineers and doctors and so forth. And if they are treated with this kind of disrespect, required to pay more than other Albertans for the same services, and I think there are serious questions about whether we are going to be effective in recruiting the kinds of people that our economy needs. I'm very heartened to see that someone like Mr. Nanda is speaking on behalf of his own experience, people that are experiencing some of the backlash that these referendum questions even being announced has generated. That these people are now being seen as a drain on rather than contributors to our economy is problematic, and it's based on misinformation. They are paying taxes, they are paying for services, they are contributing to the economy, and if they are refugees, the federal government is paying their health care, not the Alberta government.
Okay, we need to take a bit of a break, but when we come back, with fuel prices spiking, federal Conservatives are calling for a fuel tax holiday. More from our politics panel in a moment. Welcome back. With war in the Middle East raging on, and countries like Ireland and Australia reducing fuel taxes in response to rising oil prices, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre calling on the Carney government now to scrap the federal gas tax for the remainder of the year.
A policy that would save 25 cents a litre, about $20 a fill-up, and $1,200 for the average family of four between now and the end of the year.
The Conservative leader argues the tax holiday would bring immediate relief to motorists, arguing lower fuel prices would also reduce the cost of food and other goods transported by truck. And he says the tax break could be paid for by cutting federal spending in other areas like the gun buyback program, foreign aid, and axing the high-speed rail project between Toronto and Quebec City. Laurie, this would see the GST, the excise tax, and the clean fuel charge lifted on gasoline and diesel. Well-timed on the part of the opposition leader? Is this the kind of move that could force the hand of the Carney government?
Well, it's certainly an area where people are really noticing. I mean, this is the reality of gas prices and gas taxes. We see them every time we go to fill up our tank. Those prices have gone up precipitously since the war in Iran emerged, and of course many Canadians would be relieved if that price came down. The reality also is that there are taxes on those gas prices at the pump that are coming from other levels of government as well. But this demand being made by Pierre Poilievre, saying what it could save Canadians, basically pointing to the federal government as something that it can do, puts enormous pressure on the government to respond.
Chris, is this something the federal government could realistically afford to do? How might it fit into the federal fiscal policy?
I'm not sure. Mr. Poilievre has provided some suggestions as to programs that could be cut to afford this tax, and I think that's a political choice. Who doesn't want lower taxes? I think it's going to appeal to a lot of Canadians who are faced with higher costs of getting to work, and we're moving into the vacation season. So I think a tax reduction on gasoline and gasoline products would be welcome.
All right, for us, one more topic, and that is the U.S. president delivering a primetime address Wednesday, updating the war on Iran, but offering no timeline for the conflict to end.
Our armed forces have been extraordinary. There's never been anything like it militarily. Everyone is talking about it, and tonight I'm pleased to say that these core strategic objectives are nearing completion.
Trump said American forces will hit Iran very hard over the next 2 to 3 weeks and suggests the war could wind down without a deal. Iran's military warning of crushing and destructive attacks in response. Chris, what do you make of the message delivered by the U.S. president? How much clarity does it bring to the need for and the direction of the war on Iran?
I think there was no new information offered last night. I think it was kind of surprising that the president requested time on all the major television networks and basically didn't say anything he hadn't said in social media in the 2 or 3 days before the event. So it seems like he had something else to say and was counseled not to say it. That's my take on it.
Lori, oil prices have soared following the president's address. WTI trading above $110 U.S. a barrel through the day today. What do you see that doing to political dynamics around the mounting global economic crisis?
So I think the speech was intended to sort of tamp down concerns, to reassure people that things are going to get better, and perhaps to affect the stock market and oil prices in a more positive way. That is, lowering the price of oil and increasing the health of the stock market. Neither of those things happened. It didn't accomplish those objectives. And I think it illustrates that both because of the mixed messaging and the fact that quite often what Donald Trump says changes or isn't reliably followed, his credibility, his ability to inject confidence, to signal things that might affect stock markets in a positive way or gas prices in a better way, all of those, the influence that could come from an announcement like that didn't come to fruition. And the reason for that is because of the vagueness of what he was saying and also the fact that what he says isn't always followed through on, and his credibility is diminishing here.
Chris, how do you see any of this resonating with Americans, and where might it leave the U.S. president politically?
I think that was possibly the motivation too for this television address. He's trying to, his popularity is plummeting. There's a lot of concern that Republicans will lose influence in the November midterm elections, and he's trying to address that. I think trying to assure people that things will be okay, things are going to get better, the end is in sight. And hopefully people will forget about all of this in the 7 months between April and the November elections.
All right. We'll have to leave it there. We're out of time. Great to see you both. Thank you kindly.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Michael.
Now, here are a few responses to a recent story posted by CTV News, and it is about the province defending proposed changes to the Education Act, which some teachers are calling censorship. Ronald says schools are for education, not indoctrination. Julie writes, my whole life I was told never to talk about politics or religion at the table. Was a giant mistake. It is imperative that we stay informed. John thinks they're upset that they can't continue to force their views onto our kids. Crystal writes, more UCP narratives of things that aren't happening in the classrooms. They have managed to make everything worse by continuing their habit of using teachers and minorities as scapegoats. Philip says this is a move to push for separatism. It's nothing more than that. Remember, you can always have your say. Email us anytime at comments@albertaprimetime.com. That is our program for tonight. Have a great evening and a great long weekend, everyone, from all of us at Alberta Primetime. Thank you for watching, and join us again next time.